Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie begins in Spain with a lawyer named Manel and his wife, Julia. We see them sitting in the house of Manel's sister, Belén. Manel is playing with his nephew, showing him videos of his cat. It's clear from Julia's expressions that she is very upset because she has wanted to have children for a long time. But her husband is against the idea. After a while, Manel asks to leave. He bids farewell to his sister and asks her to greet her husband for him. His sister apologizes, explaining that her husband is not with them because he is on a military mission. We learn that her husband works in the army and is often away. Afterward, Manel gets into the car with his wife and they leave. The whole drive, Julia remains upset and doesn't speak to him. Manel asks her what's bothering her. Julia tells him that she desperately wants to have children and doesn't understand why he opposes the idea, especially since he loves kids. She explains that she is getting older and might not be able to conceive later. Manel responds that he isn't ready for children now and asks her to stop talking about it because he won't change his mind. Suddenly, a car appears and crashes into them, and unfortunately, Julia dies. A year later, we see that Manel now lives alone and has fallen into severe depression after his wife's death. He feels immense guilt because he argued with her before she died and refused to fulfill her last wish. That day, Manel hears on the news about a new virus spreading worldwide. The virus is said to be far more dangerous than COVID-19 and has already spread across most European countries, including Spain. The government urges people to be cautious since there is no cure yet, but Manel doesn't pay much attention. Later, he meets with buyers who were supposed to purchase his boat. We learn that he wants to sell the boat at all costs because it reminds him of his wife. When he enters the boat, he begins reminiscing about his past with Julia, recalling when she bought him his first diving suit because she knew he loved diving. At night, Manel returns home and calls his sister to check on her. He tells her he didn't sell the boat and asks her to find new buyers. His sister promises to take care of it and mentions that there are reports of the virus mutating and becoming more aggressive. The military base where her husband works has decided to relocate them to the Canary Islands, as it's the only place the virus hasn't reached. She asks Manel to travel with them because she wouldn't feel safe leaving him alone in Spain. At first, Manel refuses because he doesn't want to leave his home and job. However, his sister insists until he agrees. She tells him she has already booked him a seat on the next flight since there was no space on their flight. The next morning, we see Manel preparing to go to the airport. As he steps out of his house, he notices that most of his neighbors are packing their belongings and fleeing the city. Manel starts to feel uneasy, sensing that something strange is happening, but he brushes it off to avoid stressing himself unnecessarily. He heads to the airport, but upon arrival, he is shocked to find that all flights have been canceled. At that moment, everyone receives emergency alerts on their phones, warning that the virus has entered Spain. The government advises people to stay home and not go outside. Panic ensues, and people start arguing with airport staff. One man even pulls out a weapon and begins attacking the staff because they won't let him board a plane. Shortly after, Belén calls her brother and urges him to return home immediately because the virus has started spreading in Spain. She assures him she will try to bring him to her as soon as possible. Manel gets into his car to drive home, but traffic is at a standstill because everyone is fleeing the city. He is forced to abandon his car and walk home. At night, Manel finally reaches his house and is shocked to see police and ambulances everywhere, surrounding a neighbor's house. He discovers that the neighbor has contracted the virus and the government wants to take him into quarantine. Strangely, the infected neighbor behaves violently, like an animal, and tries to attack the police officers, but they manage to subdue him. The shocking revelation is that the new virus turns people into zombies. Manel is horrified by what he witnesses and realizes the gravity of the situation. The next day, we see Manel watching the news, learning that hundreds of people have been infected and turned into zombies. The government is no longer able to control the situation. Manel decides to self-isolate at home. He goes to the supermarket to buy supplies, but upon arrival, he is shocked to see people in a state of hysteria, looting all the products. Manel finds nothing to take. As he leaves the supermarket, a zombie attacks an infected officer. Manel hides inside the supermarket and locks himself in. Suddenly, he hears someone screaming and sees a zombie attacking another officer and biting him. When the zombie notices Manel, it charges at him to eat him, but the officer shoots the zombie and urges Manel to run. At night, Manel returns home, locks all the doors and windows, and receives a message on his phone stating that the army will evacuate the city and relocate all residents to a safer area. Manel is unsure if the new location will be safe, so he decides to stay hidden in his house. After several hours, the army arrives and begins evacuating the city. Manel stays hidden until they leave, ensuring they don't notice him. 2 weeks later, the city is completely deserted. All communication lines have been cut, leaving Manel unable to contact his sister. With no news of her, he decides to venture out in search of food. He wears his diving suit to protect himself from zombie bites and begins his journey. Manel searches through all the houses in the city but finds them empty until he reaches the home of an elderly woman named Gabriela. She is sitting alone in her empty house. Manel asks Gabriela why she is alone and didn't leave with her family. She tells him that her son abandoned her, alone because she is paralyzed, and it was very difficult for him to take her with him. So Manel feels pity for her and reassures her that he will stay by her side. Later, Gabrielle tells him about some houses nearby where he might find food. Indeed, Manel goes around all these houses, collects all the food and supplies he can find, and then returns to Gabrielle. They sit and eat together. At night, Manel sits alone drinking, and suddenly the radio turns on. He hears a voice urging all survivors to head to the Canary Islands, as it's the safest place for them. The voice assures them that the virus hasn't reached there yet. Manel communicates with Gabrielle via wireless and asks her to prepare herself to go with him to the Canary Islands. However, Gabrielle tells him she is paralyzed and would be a burden on him, urging him to leave without her so as not to trouble him. But Manel refuses to leave her alone and insists she comes with him. The next day, we see Manel preparing all his belongings and heading to Gabrielle. When he arrives, he finds her dead. He realizes that she took her own life so she wouldn't have to travel with him and be a burden. She leaves him a letter thanking him for everything he did for her. Naturally, Manel is deeply saddened and leaves the house feeling defeated. Suddenly, a zombie attacks him, but Manel manages to kill it. He then returns home, drinking and thinking about what to do next until he decides to escape by sea. He takes his cat and motorcycle and heads toward the port. On the way, he is surprised by a massive group of zombies attacking him. He quickly accelerates the motorcycle to its maximum speed and manages to escape. When he reaches the port, he locks the door securely to prevent the zombies from getting to him. He boards his boat and tries to start it, but it's broken. Manel is forced to take a lifeboat and sets off. At night, the lifeboat breaks down in the middle of the sea, leaving Manel unsure of what to do. Luckily, he spots a ship approaching him. He waves to them until they stop and take him aboard. They give him food, and later, the ship's crew sits with Manel. He learns they are from Ukraine, and one of them, named Victor, speaks Spanish and translates for his companions. Manel notices that the ship's captain and crew treat him coldly, but he doesn't dwell on it as he needs their help. At night, while Manel is sleeping, he wakes up to the sound of commotion. Looking out the window, he sees a group of survivors arriving at the ship on a lifeboat. The next day, Manel sits with the ship's crew, and they ask him to tell them the locations of cement factories in the city. Manel is very puzzled by their request and doesn't understand why they need cement. However, he reluctantly provides the information. Later, Manel becomes suspicious when he doesn't see the people who arrived the previous night on the lifeboat. He asks Victor where they went, but Victor becomes nervous and claims no one arrived the night before. Manel is sure he's lying and demands to know what they did to them. Victor warns him not to bring up the subject if he wants to live. At this point, Manel is certain something wrong is happening on the ship and decides to escape. At night, Manel prepares to flee but discovers prisoners tied up on the ship. They turn out to be the same people who arrived the previous night. Manel quickly moves to free them, but one of the crew members arrives and kills one of the prisoners. He then prepares to kill Manel, but Victor intervenes, attacking the crew member and beating him to death. Victor then decides to escape with Manel. They take a lifeboat and flee together. However, during their escape, the ship's crew spots them and starts shooting at them. Victor is hit in the shoulder, but Manel speeds up as much as he can and manages to get far away from the ship. After some time, they reach the shore. Manel takes Victor into a car and drives toward a hospital ship to treat Victor's injury. Manel knows there's a helicopter at the hospital and plans to use it to travel to the Canary Islands. On the way, Victor confesses to Manel that the ship's captain is collecting as many prisoners as possible to build a shelter to protect himself from the zombies. Anyone who opposes him is killed immediately. The captain was searching for cement to use in constructing the shelter. Manel is shocked by what he hears and tells Victor that the man must be held accountable for his actions. After some time, they arrive in front of the hospital, but they are surprised to find a large number of zombies there. Manel gets out of the car and starts killing them. He then takes Victor and quickly enters the hospital, leaving Victor alone in a room while he searches for tools to remove the bullet from Victor's body. In the meantime, Manel hears voices in the hospital. He follows the sound and calls out loudly, saying he needs help because he has an injured person with him. A nurse and a doctor, accompanied by 3 children whose parents died, come out to meet him. The doctor takes Victor to the operating room to remove the bullet. At night, Manel sits with the nurse and doctor and asks them about the children. They explain that the children's parents died in the hospital, and they have no one to care for them. The next day, Manel finds the location of the helicopter, but the problem is that zombies are swarming around it. Manel is unsure how to reach the helicopter. At that moment, his phone gets a signal, and he discovers that his sister sent him numerous messages since the beginning of the disaster. Overwhelmed with emotion, he watches the messages while crying. He sends a message to his sister, reassuring her that he's okay and promising to come to her soon. Suddenly, Manel hears gunfire. Looking down, he is shocked to see the captain and his gang arriving at the hospital. Manel panics when he sees them and quickly goes to gather the people with him to escape on the helicopter. During their escape, a zombie appears and bites the doctor. Knowing she will turn into a zombie soon, the doctor asks them to leave her behind and take care of the children. They all bid the doctor a final farewell and continue their way. When they reach the exit gate, they find the entire area surrounded by zombies. Any slight movement would alert the zombies and lead to an attack. Manel carefully observes the zombies and signals to his companions to quietly move through the gate. The nurse takes 2 of the children with her and cross it. With them, he moves away, and afterward, Victor follows behind them. Only one little girl remains standing in her place, too scared to move. Manel takes her and starts moving slowly toward the gate. However, at that moment, the zombies hear them and try to attack. Quickly, Manel takes the girl with him and hides in a room. At the same time, the Ukrainian gang arrives at the location and starts killing the zombies, unaware that Manel is there. Once Manel ensures that the gang has left, he exits the room with the girl and reunites with his group. When they look out the window, they see the helicopter parked in front of them. However, the problem is that zombies are surrounding the helicopter. Here, Manel gets an idea to make their way through the zombies. He gathers all the metal stands in the hospital, surrounds themselves with them, and begins moving through the zombies. The zombies are unable to approach them at that moment. They keep moving until they reach the helicopter. Everyone boards it and tries to start it, but they're still struggling. At that moment, the zombies attack them again. Manel gets off the helicopter and starts fighting them until Victor manages to start the helicopter. Unfortunately, the gang arrives at that moment and attacks them to steal the helicopter. Manel gets another idea and opens the iron gate, letting all the zombies attack the gang. At the same moment, Victor finally gets the helicopter running and takes off. He throws a rope to Manel to climb up. Manel quickly grabs the rope and starts climbing until he reaches the helicopter, feeling very proud of his achievement. A few hours later, Manel receives a call from his sister. Excitedly, he tells her he's finally coming to her. However, his sister asks him to return and shocks him with the news that zombies have attacked the Canary Islands and the situation is dire. Manel is devastated by what he hears and doesn't know where to go. The movie ends. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell to receive all new updates. See you in the next video. Goodbye.